Welcome to the Fusion Power Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Gillespie. I'm the CSO and owner here at Fusion Power. Today with me, I have our guest, James Reese, who is our procurement manager here at Fusion Power. I'm going to be excited to introduce him in just a few minutes. As a precursor to the episode today, there are a lot of things that you can do right in solar, and there's a lot of things that you can do wrong in solar. One area that's going to make or break you as a company, particularly if you're an installer, is going to be cash flow. And that's going to be highly reliant on your ability to get equipment when you need it and at a good price. Would you agree with that, James?
1,000%.
So it's complex, it's difficult, forecasting sales to make sure that you have all the proper purchase orders, ensuring that jobs are getting through the install to free up your lines of credit with your suppliers, to be able to get your next round of equipment, finding the best pricing to maintain a decent margin to operate on. And when we're talking about margin here, a lot of times we're talking about a penny or a half a penny makes all the difference in the world. And so it's a very, very important role that we are so grateful that you're part of our company. And James, you've been doing procurement for quite some time now.
Yes, I have.
On the other side of it, both with us doing procurement as well as selling on the other side. Give us a little bit of a background. Tell us, how did you get into to solar, and what's been your experience over the last almost decade, right?
Yeah, I've been in the solar industry right around 11 years now. My background is, I had my start at CED, and I started in the warehouse. So I really learned this industry from the very bottom floor and worked my way up into sales eventually. But, most of my knowledge came from working at a counter, hearing the different parts and pieces. It could be the same product, but you get 100 different customers, it's explained to you 100 different ways, but the main thing that never changes is what's its application. So that's really how I learned most of everything, and was blessed to work myself into inside sales, and had some of my own customers as well that I reached out and watched them grow, help them build.
Awesome. What made you had a great career over there at CED for a long time. What made you made the switch to come over to an individual company, particularly Fusion Power?
Really, I just always wanted to be a part, I guess, fully involved in the growth of one company opposed to multiple companies. Coming over here was truly a blessing to focus on different aspects of business as a whole, taking over the warehouse and also in charge of fleet. It was just exciting just to be a part of the positivity.
Did you realize what you were walking into when you came over here as far as the magnitude or the responsibility that's required of you?
I did not, but bring on more.
Yeah. It's been awesome. You've done a fantastic job so far. Okay, I've got a warm-up question for you, okay?
Let's go.
So James has a reputation of knowing just about everything that you can know as far as parts and pieces go. So I have not shown you these parts. I went out to the warehouse. I grabbed 3 random things off the shelf, and I want to see if James can either give us the name of the part, either the SKU or part number, because I've heard that you're able to do that, and then if you can give us what the price is. I took pictures of the SKU on the box. I'm going to see how close you can get. I don't expect you to get any of these, but I've heard that you might be able to do that, so I want to just play this game. Okay, so this first one, can you tell us what is this here? I'll give it to you if you feel like you need to see it.
So the trick, this is a conduit body. So the trick is to hold it like a gun. If it comes off the left side, it's an LL. So it's 2 inch. So it's an LL 200.
How much would that cost? Yeah, how much do we get those for?
I mean, they fluctuate, but you could see anywhere from $12 to $27.
Okay. All right, cool. Ready for your next one? And that's true. I have LL A200 right there. Good job. Okay. Here's the next one. This is kind of an easy one for you.
Yeah, so I'll give you the Madison part number on this. I'll say if this is 2 inches well. So Madison would be a MECR 754B. Or it would be a 764B because the 6 is indication for a coupling opposed to a connector.
I don't even know what I'm reading on the SKU here to verify that. 264 SRT. Does that mean anything to you?
Yeah, that's the orbit part number.
Good job. All right, one more. Tell me what this thing is.
This is a tough one. They call this a monkey butt. That's a trade term for it. And it's a 3-pole. So it'd be like an IPBB NA 350 would be the indication on it. IPBB NA 253S.
Yes, that is a 250, correct. Fantastic. Good job, James.
I thought you were going to give me harder ones than that. I was like,
I grabbed him. I'm like, I don't know if he has those ones memorized or not. Tell us a little bit about what does your day-to-day routine look like as a procurement manager here at Fusion? What do you do on the daily?
So on the daily, I mean, I like to show up 3 times a week before the rest of my team to ensure that everything's flowing smooth. I like to get with the install manager, Dominic, and get with a lot of supervisors, listen to everybody, see what they may be missing, kind of, you get a lot of different guys that come from different companies and they use different products. So I like to hear that feedback, because if I could figure out a solution to speed up the install time a little bit faster, but at the same time get a better price, I pretty much come in and listen. I come in and I listen, I help where it's needed, just get the ball rolling, get everything pretty smooth. Of course, write emails, make sure they have everything, check up on my day-to-day.
Okay. Crews load up, they're out, they're gone, and now it's you guys are. What's the warehouse crew doing at this point? What do you have the warehouse crew doing now that the crews are gone? And then what do they do in preparation for the next day?
So the day-to-day for the warehouse, of course, I have my main opening guy. He just comes in, opens up. He's also the fleet supervisor, so he's basically listening to vehicles, loading up each crew. Every team, and currently we're at 18 teams, they're loading up rail, connectors, couplings, most of their BOS throughout the day. The day before, my team reads every plan set that comes out from the install manager, and we do a full takeoff and pull all the main materials and kit it on a cart for the teams.
Perfect. Let me ask you this. What have been some of the major challenges in buying equipment over the last couple of years? And it's been crazy the last couple of years between COVID, which ended up resulting in equipment supply issues, and then pricing went crazy. Kind of give me some of what have been some of those challenges for you over the last few years?
I mean, the main challenge, especially because of COVID, was actually finding the parts. Putting all your eggs in one basket it's not a good solution. I mean, there's times during COVID where you couldn't find it anywhere in the States, but yet Amazon has it. That was the main challenge. Just supply. You had a lot of these shops or manufacturers that were shutting down to make hand sanitizer, and I mean, most people know you can't slam a bottle of hand sanitizer inside of an electrical panel. You're going to get shocked. So that was the main struggle, is just finding it, staying on top of it. Luckily, here at Fusion, we're able to review a lot of these jobs, and we got the supporting cast to be like, hey, James, look, this one-off panel is coming down the pipeline. So I had, a heads up to be able to find them.
I remember during COVID, we'd have these little memos come out from your team saying, if you guys are at Home Depot and you happen to see like a 30-amp breaker, grab it and buy it and bring it to the warehouse, just because they're so impossible to get.
Yep, and a lot of help. I mean, I remember driving home and stopping at 5 different Home Depots just to grab breakers to come in early in the morning to be like, hey guys, yep, we got that backfeed breaker for your solar system. And I mean, that's what we did. And it was all hands on deck. Everybody would do it. I would put out flyers. People would come to me, hey, I found 2 breakers in Ahwatukee.
Yeah.
I'm like, congratulations.
Luckily, COVID's pretty much behind us, and supply chain has kind of replenished itself. Are we still having issues of finding parts, or do you feel like it's pretty much settled down?
It's starting to catch up now, meaning a lot more parts are readily available. But you still have those one-offs that are out there. Eaton was having big issues with 2-pole 40s. For us, it's like, grab all you can get. I mean, next week, I'm sure it might be a 60-amp disconnect, or, you're always going to have that.
And I've noticed that your philosophy is like, try to have as much as you can. If you go out to our warehouse, we've got a pretty good stock of a lot of stuff, just because you don't know when it's going to be available again if something goes wrong, right? And I've noticed that you do a really good job of just making sure that we have inventory.
Yeah, I try to make sure that I look at the overall picture of our growth. Say if we were going to add another team tomorrow, I like to be able to say, hey, if crap hit the fan, that we are able to run for 2 weeks. That's what I try to do. Now, you add another team in the mix, of course, that's twice the amount of volume. So, I mean, that's one thing I do pretty much every day. I like to review what we have, see how much is going through. I see it visually. I look at everything that goes in and out of that warehouse, and then I try to do projections.
Okay, we'll talk about projections here in a second. I want to ask you, because you used to be on the supplier side selling to a lot of different installers, and so you're having to deal with, well, your line of credit is either allows you to let me give you equipment, or you've maxed out your line. I can't give you anything.
Yeah.
With that in mind, and kind of having dealt with so many installers out there, what challenges do you see with installers in the near future as they continue to deal with lines of credit issues with the suppliers, as well as the the direct pay programs like Ensemble kind of going away without M1 payments being made from the lenders to the installers? Does that question make sense?
It does. I think the biggest thing for a lot of these companies, when they hit to that credit bump, of course, you're going to get cut off. That's the nature of the beast, and I hate to say it, but it's a good thing for other companies and growth. It's all going to go down to the CFO, to be able to manage all those purchases and be able to look through the books. And, we all know it's not just, hey, here's money, go buy this. There's a long line of where it comes to sales coming in and getting PTO. And I think that's where it all stems from.
But if I'm an installer and I max out my line over here, can I just go to another supply house and just open up another line and get all my equipment from them?
Technically you can, but one thing is as soon as you try to open up that line of credit, they're contacting that other distribution house, and they're going to go, oh, here's their financials.
And that's the point of the question. There's nothing secret in this industry. As I've
really
talked to you, and as we've bought equipment for the last several years, everybody knows and everybody talks. And so it's if you're not doing things the right way, or if you're in a struggling situation, everybody knows, and they're letting each other know about the risk that's there.
Correct.
With those groups.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see happen if a company can't pay down their line of credit and they're trying and they need equipment? What's their option? What do they do at that point?
At that point, hopefully they have cash, because it comes to a point where you're going to start seeing companies using credit cards. And then after those credit cards run up, it's going to go to cash. And then eventually you're going to hit that roadblock.
Right. And that's the sad part, right? Is if an EPC can't buy its equipment, it can install. And so they're just going to have to wait for that pipeline to either clear itself and have a little bit of cash to buy the next bulk order.
Yep.
But otherwise, we're going to see something crazy. And we're going to see that like we've never seen before in California with that huge rush with NEM2.
Yep.
Pretty much every company that was at any respectable size, they have completely maxed out. And you've basically got a California freeway traffic jam, so to speak, in their pipeline, where they're not going to have enough cash on hand to fulfill all of the installs that were just dumped in their laps. It's going to be tough.
I've already heard horror stories about it. Yes, it is. Definitely is.
Let me ask you this: what do you do to stay out in front of industry changes to make sure that we're prepared for whatever's coming down the chute?
It all comes down to networking. I talk to as many people as I can, pick their brains, trust my gut. If I hear any word that something might be coming on national back order, I ensure that I'm not just 2 weeks in front of install. I try to grab as much as I can to ensure that there's no real bump in the road for us at any time.
If I'm a new installer and I'm trying to get up and running, how do I increase my buying power? Because equipment is very expensive. Mm-hmm. And if you're in the sales side of it, that's something that you don't really pay attention to. You just know that you have your red line and you make your commission based on how you sell it. But what we don't really think about if we're a rep is that under that red line, there's a build cost, right? And between that build cost and your red line, I've got a net here flying around my face. Between your build cost and your red line, that's, the only margin that's there for the installer to be able to capitalize and operate their business. But that build cost is going to be largely made up, or it's going to be made up of equipment, and obviously your personnel, your crews, your account managers, everybody else that goes into that cost. If I'm a new installer though, and I'm trying to figure out how to decrease my cost of equipment, what are my options here? Because otherwise, I might, with today's pricing, with inflation the way that it is, there might not be any margin for me to even be competitive and make any money being an installer.
I mean, at that point, it's doing your research on different manufacturers. What's the lowest price? There's really no way to scale without volume, if that makes sense, because you have to keep that train rolling. And without that train rolling, you really don't gain any more buying power until those sales come in. If you have strong sales and you're just starting out and those sales are coming behind you and those contracts are getting signed and those PTOs are coming in, that's where you gain. As you scale is where you're able to drive down that cost overall for the company.
You've dealt with hundreds of installers over the last several years. How can you tell, especially when you were on the sales side of it, how can you tell how they're doing as a company?
That's a tricky question.
Are you able to determine if they are having success or if they're struggling based on the way that they're purchasing?
Yes. When I was a sales rep, I mean, you can tell. I mean, you just know. I mean, those POs are flying in, and but it's really hard. Like if it's towards the end of the year, I remember companies, they would do big buys to help scale for the beginning of the year. But I mean, at the end of the year, it's really tough because that's where everybody's driving to get as many installs installed. So you'll see companies that generally did 2 installs a week, and then next, they're buying enough material to do 6 because they're just pounding out jobs, trying to get those numbers up for the end of the year.
What are some of the qualities of the companies that do the best in the solar space from a purchasing perspective?
From a purchasing perspective, attention to detail, communication. I mean, I've sat in a position where somebody would write me an order for a job, and it was a picture of a notebook where they just wrote down everything they need, opposed to an email or, hey, James, how you doing? I want to follow up with this. Do you understand what I mean by this? And I mean, really the communication factor. There's times where, like I said, I've gotten that picture of that order, and then you give them exactly what they described, and they're like, I didn't order this. What's going on? Do you not know what I'm talking about? It's like, well, clearly, I guess I didn't,
How would you say that our purchasing process has evolved over the last couple of years at Fusion and our inventory process?
I mean, complete 360. We're paying attention, starting with this NetSuite as well. I mean, a lot of these key parts and pieces, we're able to track really the flow, our usage that's coming through the pipeline. We could pretty much forecast on all the main products that we use, and we could see it in live time from time of sale to scheduled install. It's completely different from when I first started. When we first started, there was still that there by way of Podio. You could still see that, but it was really hard to judge exactly what was coming through the pipeline. And I could see it by this time next year, it's going to be a complete 360 from what it is today. I mean, we're constantly working on it.
Continually evolving.
Yeah.
Yeah. What happens if you don't?
It's a mess. It is a mess. I mean,
You
could keep something for so long.
But you just go walk that warehouse. I mean, there are literally hundreds of these tiny little pieces that you've got to keep track of. And yeah, that might cost you $10, but that times, I don't know how many we have in there. And if I don't know how many we have in there, then how much are we spending? Like you're just playing with tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars, depending on how you've scaled. And if this stuff isn't accounted for and inventoried and measured against what you've ordered and what's been delivered, holy smokes, it's really hard to figure out your accounting.
Yeah, there definitely has to be a method to the madness. Of course, you don't want something to sit on your shelf for too long. So visually is the biggest thing. If you're seeing it rotate, you know where you're at. Now, if you see a certain piece like this, which this isn't the factor, but sitting on your shelf for 2 weeks and there's not one, well, don't order anymore. That's the main thing, just paying attention to it and tracking everything. And visually, that's how I do it mainly. But now we're starting to put it on paper and track it that way, which is helping out a lot.
It's good. All right, let's talk about some equipment here. Why do solar companies need to charge adders for certain equipment, for premium mods or premium inverters or flat roof mounting or all the different things? Why is it, if I'm a rep and I've never had this question answered, why do solar companies charge adders on equipment?
From what I see, I mean, there's a lot more money that's involved to complete a lot of these systems. If you're going to a flat roof, I mean, if you just think about it, a box of Chemlink that you're using to seal that flat roof, well, each penetration, say like a 6-inch, for instance, there's only 3 of those in a box. They're anywhere from $100 to $150 a box. So that's for every 3 penetrations that are on that roof. So just to seal that roof, you could be looking at $5 or $6 grand, and that's on top. Tilt connectors, there's probably 4 different pieces that are involved to be able to accomplish that tilt on a flat roof. There's a lot more involved than just slamming a panel on a roof. You have all different types. You have the flat roofs where you're doing your tilts. You have S-tile, flat tile, comp shingle, all different prices, all different applications.
And understanding that there are variable costs. Again, if I'm a sales rep, understand that those adders, they're not additional margin that the company is making. Those are the additional costs that are having to be passed on to the customer. And if you're building out that system, you need to make sure that you're accounting for those adders in your proposals so that it doesn't end up, eating into your commissions. So super important to understand that. James, are all mods created equal? And then what should I be considering as a rep or as an installer when I'm buying modules?
I don't really think they're all created equal, but there's a pretty even playing field. I mean, what it boils down for me is I look at all the AVLs that module is on. To be able to offer a product to a sales rep where they don't have to worry what loan the customer is able to use, I think is one of the most powerful things. That's one of my main goals when I'm looking into making a deal with some of these manufacturers that are out there.
What about with inverters?
With inverters, the method to my madness is I like to look at how much work the service department has to do.
Because what happens when an inverter fails?
The service department's out there. And, that's the beauty of Fusion Power. There's sometimes I've been told to ask the service department to calm down because they're fixing it before they even aware of it. But when you're having to hire 5-6 more individuals to fix a problem or create a solution, that's when it's time to open your eyes.
Maybe just 1 or 2 more questions here. Off the top of your head, how much inventory do we run through in a given month? Maybe by category, like categorically, how many mods are we installing a month right now? Do you know?
Well, last month we did 2.3 megs, so that's roughly,
How many mods is that?
I think it was like 5,400 and something.
It's a lot of modules. I know that. 6,200, if my calculations are correct here, based on
Perfect.
370 watts. So we're moving. We're moving through
Yeah.
that. Those are container after container after container. And so with the amount of volume that we push out, though, without having you for overseeing that and making sure that those POs are out there and well priced, we're stuck in the water. So we are very blessed to have you as part of the group. Let me ask you one last question as a wrap up here. What do you think your greatest value is here at Fusion Power? What do you provide that you really feels like, that's I'm adding value to Fusion?
I read this question at home yesterday, and it was eating me up while I was eating dinner. But if I have to think my greatest value, it would be that I'm solution-based. I'm a firm believer that the number one thing that drives me nuts is when somebody says I can't do something. And I'm the type of person when somebody says I can't do it, well, let me show you. I like to be solution based. I mean, I believe there's a fix for all aspects of deficiencies within a company. And if not, let's try it. Let's make it work.
Perfect. Cool. Well, coming from me to you, you've been a huge value add for the company. You have got us organized in a way that we certainly were not before you came on, and you've been able to help us with our pricing that allows us to function at a much healthier level as a company, which is so important right now with the continuing changes in interest rates and inflation, without having somebody looking at every single part and piece and the cost on each one of those and making sure that we're getting the best deal, that the equipment's there to install for our reps so that they're not waiting in a traffic lane. The value that Fusion offers to our reps and to our sales partners largely starts over here in the equipment procurement. So James, we thank you for everything that you do for us at Fusion.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here, and I'm truly blessed.
Awesome. Appreciate your ears today, guys. Thank you for joining us for the Fusion Power Podcast. We will see you next week. Over and out.